It seems you've been waiting for me. Very well. Welcome to my camp. I'm your shaman. These forests are not safe at night. I would advise against leaving until first dawn light. Stay as long as you like, relax, and let me read you a story. When you wake up, I will be gone, but maybe you will see me again someday. Now, tonight's story. I work at a cemetery where the graves dig themselves, by Rude Dude Rudolph. I work as a groundskeeper at my local cemetery. However, I don't really like that title. With my recent experiences, I'm beginning to wonder if these grounds can truly be kept. I used to work as a contracted landscaper, jumping from project to project until I grew tired of moving. My last leap landed me in a small town where I'm staying with my sister. Right now, she is the only thing keeping me grounded. Groundskeeper needs to be grounded. 6 months ago, I was writing out the last bit of my paycheck from my previous job when I received the news that my niece had died. There was an accident at the playground. Nothing anyone could have done, my sister told me, even though I could hear the guilt in her voice. The news devastated me, and I couldn't even imagine how my sister was handling it. So I spent the last of my money on a cross-country flight, a train ride, and a bus ticket. My sister lived in the middle of nowhere, but there was no way I was missing the funeral. I had spent so much time away from my niece that I owed her a final goodbye. That's where I met Mr. Lazarus. Due to it being a small town, Mr. Arnold Lazarus wore many hats, or masks, if you ask me. Town mortician, funeral host, cemetery superintendent, but you little bastard. But the only title relevant to me was the one he bestowed upon himself the day at my niece's funeral: employer. You see, I was strapped for cash and I was planning to stay with my sister for a while, which meant I needed a job. If I was going to be any kind of support, I had to stop being a leech first. It was my sister's idea to introduce me to Arnold. She quickly mentioned my landscaping experience and noted that the cemetery was noticeably run down. Jesus. Please excuse your shaman. He was feeling very, very disappointed in the mosquitoes. Needed a change of clothes. Let's get back to the story. If I was going to be any kind of support, I had to stop being a leech first. It was my sister's idea to introduce me to Arnold. She quickly mentioned my landscaping experience and noted that the cemetery was noticeably run down. Excuse me! Mr. Lazarus, thank you for the service, my sister said, her voice heavy with sorrow of a newly grieving mother. Thank you. The ghastly man, dressed in all black formal attire, turned around and extended his free hand, his other hand gripping his worn-out Bible. Loose papers and page markers were sticking out of its weathered pages, like gravestones from the ground.
Pleasure to see you again, Mr. Faust. My sincere condolences for the loss of your daughter. No doubt she was a bright young girl and had so much life to give, he said with a cold smile as she shook my sister's hand. I suppose his words were meant to comfort, but they only caused the cracked, dried-out riverbeds on her cheeks to flow once more. Through the tears, she managed to introduce the shy stranger standing behind her, me.
This is my brother, Wilhelm, but you can call him Will. He would like to speak with you about the condition of your cemetery. You see, he's a landscaper and I believe he could help spruce up the place.
She let out a weak laugh before her runny nose and the tears took over. Deciding her part was done, she quickly ran off somewhere else to collect herself. I took a step after her, only to be blocked by a bone-white hand that sprang out in front of me. The hand belonged to Mr. Lazarus, but its startling appearance caught me off guard. His appendages were gaunt and crooked with age, and so was the rest of him. His eyes sagged in their sockets, and his skin was covered in old blisters and deep wrinkles. Simply put, he looked like he already had both feet in the grave. Yet, his personality was surprisingly lively. After a cold yet firm handshake, I began sharing some ideas on how I would spruce up the place, as much as one can spruce up a graveyard. To my surprise, I was offered a job. Mr. Lazarus said I was exactly the person that he was looking for. Despite only talking to him for a few minutes, I could already tell that he was a well-educated man and still quite sharp for his age. His well of wisdom seemed nearly endless. I decided then and there that it would be an honor working for someone like him. At least, that's what I told him. I just really needed a job. After all, how much wisdom could one gain from digging some graves and pruning some bushes? I've been here for 6 months, and I can count on one hand the number of graves I've had to dig myself. 5. 5 graves for 5 expected deaths. Old people and cancer patients mostly, but those aren't the deaths I'm writing about. It's the unexpected ones that cause me the most unease. Not the deaths themselves, but the fact that they come as a surprise to everyone in town, everyone except whoever keeps digging their graves the day before they die. You see, I've only dug 5 graves, but in truth, the total number of people laid to rest in this cemetery over the past 6 months is well over 20. I've never worked in a cemetery before, but for a town of around 2,000 people, that number feels a bit excessive. At first, I didn't think much of the holes. Figured someone else was just doing my job for me. And I was fine with that, as long as I was the one getting paid for the work. I asked Mr. Lazarus about it a few months back, but he just shrugged it off as a prank. And I wasn't convinced. I don't know how many people would spend their evenings digging 6-foot holes as a joke. The only explanation I could come up with was that some backyard botanist was stealing soil from the graveyard, because every time a hole appeared, there would be no trace of the dirt that once filled it. The lunatic probably thought the soil would be rich in nutrients. How stupid he must feel, because after 6 months I'm still struggling to get anything to grow in this godforsaken place. Regardless, Mr. Lazarus asked that every month I write down how many holes had been dug as well as the dates they were dug. He insisted I take payment for each one. It felt strange recording the dates, especially as the pattern became clear. Eventually I started lying about the dates. I didn't want to be the one explaining why I kept digging graves for people who hadn't yet died. Unlike this little sucker. Only for them to die the next day. I thought about doing something about it, but it's not like I can post an ad in the town newspaper. What would I even say? Warning! Freshly dug grave. Tread carefully and get your affairs in order. Maybe I'll post it alongside an ad for a law firm. I can help remind folks to update their will and testament. Call it Will's Will. Sorry, I'm getting off topic. There really was nothing I could do. It's not like the graves came with name tags, or at least not that I knew of at the time. So I couldn't exactly run around town pretending to be a psychic, warning people about their imminent demises. That brings me to the deaths themselves. As I said, they were always unexpected. Mostly accidents. For such a small town, there's an absurd number of bizarre deaths that seemingly have nothing in common, except that in some cases, for whom the bell tolls, it seems to ring with a kind of poetic irony. You'll see what I mean once I list a few, even though you probably won't believe me. They range from the mundane, like a school teacher choking on an apple a student gave to her, to the downright headline-worthy, like a politician accidentally slitting his own throat with a pair of giant golden scissors. There was a snake wrangler who died from a bee sting. Or was it a beekeeper who got bitten by a snake? I don't remember. It could be both. We had a drug dealer who overdosed. Out of all the deaths, that one's probably the most easily explained and arguably justified. On the other side of that coin, my favorite bartender got hit by a drunk driver. Rest in peace, Larry. What a great guy. I miss you, buddy. We even had a weatherman who got struck by lightning live on TV. Okay, that last one was made up, but you get the idea. My point is, there's some serious divine intervention going on in this town. The only question is, who's pulling the strings? The only thing these deaths have in common is that all their graves simply appeared overnight. At first, it was just the holes, but after a few months, something else started appearing overnight. The tombstones. Solid granite, polished to perfection, with each person's name carefully etched into the stone. Always accompanied by some intricate design that seemed to speak directly to the family of the deceased. Whoever Mr. Lazarus got these from clearly put a lot of effort into making them just right. Almost too perfect. And the strangest part was the delivery time. I always imagined some cocaine addict wielding a chisel, because normally a tombstone like that takes anywhere from 1 to 3 months to make. But Arnold always had them ready within a week. He knew it looked suspicious. He urged me to wait before installing them, to surprise the family with a brand new tombstone, free of charge. Well, not exactly free, it did cost them a loved one. But this was the least they could do, or at least we could do, to give back to the community, or so Mr. Lazarus said. I always found the wording a bit strange, like it was some kind of twisted transaction. Only now do I realize what he meant. It was late afternoon, the sun just about to dip below the thick tree line at the edge of the cemetery, casting long shadows across the graves. I was tending to my usual tasks when I saw the ghostly white figure of my sister approaching. The last few months had done nothing to ease her pain, and the only time she left the house was to visit Lisa's grave. She was on her way for another visit, the usual bouquet of day-old supermarket flowers furiously clutched in her hands. I was on my knees, hacking away at a stubborn root that had been giving me trouble all day. Just like this little fucking bastard. Did I get it? Sweat dripped down my face, and dirt caked my hands. I looked up at her, and her gaze met mine, her face scrunched up, anger burning into her gaze. Anger burning in her gaze, sorry.
You know, Will, the whole reason I got you this job was so you could clean up around Lisa's grave. But it's been months, and that corner of the cemetery looks even worse than when we buried her. What's wrong with you? Have you no respect for your own family?
Her words spat down at me, making me feel just as worthless as the dirt I sat in. The truth is, I'd been avoiding that area ever since the funeral. I couldn't bring myself to visit her grave, even though I worked just a few meters away from it almost every day. I'm sorry, Marie, I just have a lot on my plate. And I can't put personal matters over my professional responsibilities. Right? I lied, knowing full well she wasn't buying any of my excuses.
That's bullshit, and you know it. You've always been a slacker.
I'll hand it to you. There are a lot of new graves around, and you seem to be putting in a lot of effort for them.
I just wish you'd show the same care towards your family.
With that, she turned away, but before she could leave, I grabbed her hand. She winced as my muddy hand coated her delicate fingers. Tears swelled in my eyes as I looked up at her, and for the first time in a long time, I was honest. I told her how the grief and guilt had become too much to bear, how I felt guilty for spending more time around Lisa now that she was dead than I ever did when she was alive, how I couldn't bring myself to visit her grave. I wish that was where my honesty ended. I told her everything, how I wasn't the one digging the graves, how they appeared even before people died, and how she was right about me being a slacker. She looked at me in confusion and disbelief, just as I feared. She didn't believe me. In one last desperate attempt to convince her, I told her about the tombstones. I explained how quickly they appeared, and after describing them in detail, her eyes shifted from disbelief to concern. I remember thinking, this is it. This is my ticket to a mental hospital 2 towns over. She pulled her hand away, dropping the bouquet in the soil beside me. She muttered a faint excuse as she turned and walked away. Not towards Lisa's grave, but toward the chapel, where I zoomed. Her car was parked. I sat there for a while, trying to collect myself. Once I got a hold of myself, I picked up the flowers and mustered up the strength to visit Lisa's grave for the first time. It was right where I left it, in the shade of an old oak tree. Though the weeds had long overtaken the once fresh dirt, beneath a pristine tombstone lay a heap of dried up flowers, much like the one I was holding. I replaced them, and for a brief moment felt a faint flicker of solace. As my eyes dried, I looked at the delicate engraving on the granite tombstone. Lisa Faust, followed by the briefest stretch of years, only 6. Can 6 years of memories be enough to last a lifetime? I'm sorry, Lisa, my little wildflower. I felt relieved, having finally paid my respects. It had been long overdue, but that relief was short-lived. Damn it. At the bottom, where the flowers lay, was a small engraving of a daisy with the word, "Rest easy, little wildflower," etched in a handwritten font. I froze. I was surprised Mary knew my nickname for Lisa, but then I remembered the similarities with the other tombstones. I never told Mary that nickname, nor did I tell Arnold. I jumped up, my furious steps pounding in sync with my heartbeat as I rushed toward the chapel. I say chapel, but it doubled as both a funeral home and at times a mortuary. It didn't matter. I was ready to face whatever mask Mr. Lazarus was wearing today. I was so focused on my mission that I barely noticed the fresh, dark grave I passed on the way there. When I reached the entrance, I noticed muddy fingerprints smeared across the cracked white paint of the door. Marie had been here. But why? Had she come to confront Mr. Lazarus too? I searched the entire building, but found no one. Just as I was about to give up and head outside to check for Marie's car, I remembered the basement, the one that served as Mr. Lazarus's mausoleum, his workroom for procuring the dead. I pushed open the rotten wooden door. It groaned heavily on its hinges, followed by an unnatural silence as I made my way down the steps. Candlelight flickered, struggling to light up the dark corners of the basement depths where the dirt meets clay. In the dim glow, I saw stacks of granite blocks draped in dusty sheets. Against the far wall stood a work table with a single candlestick, the only source of light in the entire room. I stepped across the cold, unfinished floor, the dust rising with each footprint planted, until I finally saw what was on the table. The candlestick was the first thing I noticed. It was old, heavy, and made from some tarnished metal. Its shaft was covered in sharp demonic engravings that looked like they'd been carved by the devil himself. The flickering light it cast revealed a slab of raw granite on the table, a pentagram smeared across its surface in thick, dark red streaks, like some sadistic finger painting. The crude drawing alone was enough to make my skin crawl. But it was the two words carved into the center that sent a cold rush of adrenaline up my spine. Marie Faust. I stumbled back, my legs nearly giving out beneath me. I scrambled for my phone and called Marie, but it went straight to voicemail. My heart sank. Was it too late? At the tone, I left a panicked message. My voice was rapid, and my breathing was heavy. I told her what I had found, urged her to be careful, and swore I'd find a way to reverse the ritual. This is how he does it. Every unexplained death is born from one man's desire to play God. Get home, lock yourself in your room, and don't do anything dangerous. As soon as I ended the voicemail, I stuffed the phone in my pocket. I grabbed the heavy candlestick, its sharp engravings biting into my palm. Blood mixing with dirt, but I didn't care. In the shaky candlelight, I began rummaging through the loose papers scattered across the table, desperate for anything that could tell me what to do next. Then I heard a voice behind me.
One man's desire to play God, you say?
The voice boomed, the question hanging in the air like dust. I spun around, the candle's flame flickered wildly, then died with sudden motion. For a split second, before darkness swallowed the room, I saw the ghoulish figure of Mr. Lazarus, standing only a few feet behind me. In the darkness that followed, I heard him shuffle closer. Then a spark of light filled the space. He had struck a match and was now close enough to reignite the candle before the wick had even lost its amber glow. My words failed me and fear left me motionless. I was now merely a human-sized candlestick holder. The silence didn't last long. It was quickly filled by the booming voice of Mr. Lazarus. He spoke in the same reassured tone he used during the funeral services, a voice meant to fill a chapel, now bouncing off the cold walls of a cramped basement. He wanted to intimidate me, and it was working. And all I could do was listen.
You make it sound like I'm the one deciding who lives and dies, when I'm merely calling in a favor for years of dedicated service to our Lord.
His laid-back out attitude left a gap in the conversation, inviting me to interject. You're fucking insane if you think this is what God... My sentence was cut short by abrupt laughter, followed by a tone as serious as the dead we bury.
You're thinking too small, Will. I do not mean the Lord as you know him, for he has long stopped listening. No, I have found much more faith in the Lord of Lies, as ironic as that sounds. For when he speaks, the world listen. I listen.
What do you mean when he speaks? Do you hear voices? I asked, indulging in his madness. Perhaps he'd slip up and reveal how I could stop this.
No, nothing as direct as that. I was never worthy. For me, he could only spare a few words at a time. It is up to me to interpret them and deliver who he has asked for.
What words does he give you? I prodded.
A name, an occupation, and a cause of death.
Larry, bartender, drunk driver. Do those words ring any bells? I asked, already knowing the answer.
About as much as Lisa, child, and swing.
He looked at me with a grin slowly spreading across his face. He knew he had struck a nerve. I felt my fingers dig into the cold metal of the candlestick, my grip tightening to the point where blood dripped from my hand and my knuckles turned white. I shot him a look of pure hatred. In response, his laughter rumbled in his chest, like he was recalling some twisted joke.
You remember the beekeeper? It turns out I mixed up the occupation and the cause of death. 2 weeks later, I got the same request, and that's when I realized the mistake. Oopsie. Who would have guessed a snake wrangler was allergic to bees? Not my fault. They shared the same name.
He let out a hearty chuckle. You're sick! How can you play with people's lives like that? Someone dying isn't just a mix-up. It shouldn't be up to you in the first place. I stepped closer, but Arnold didn't flinch. You're gonna tell me how to stop this, and then I might think about letting you live, I said, spewing out empty threats.
Oh, look at you, deciding who lives and dies. I already told you, you don't get to choose. You don't have enough credit. Me, on the other hand.
He stepped closer, pressing his wrinkled face against my cheek, and whispered in my ears, I have enough to purge your entire bloodline. The anger that had been swelling in me boiled over. I shoved the old bag of bones to the ground and raised the heavy candlestick over him in a threatening gesture. Tell me how to stop it! His tone shifted along with his posture. Now, on the ground, he pleaded.
There's nothing you can do. By engraving the tombstone with a name, the ground is broken and their fate is sealed. The tear and the earth will not close until its hunger is satisfied. Come morning, your sister will be dead, and her spirit will be claimed. Her body is the only thing that can complete the transaction.
I've heard enough! I swung the candlestick down with all the force I could muster, the flame snuffing out instantly as the heavy metal collided with Arnold's skull. The base shattered with a sickening crack, rolling off into the darkness as his body crumbled to the floor. In the stillness, I could hear the shallow breaths he took, face pressed into the dirt. For now, he was out cold. I was relieved he wasn't dead. I figured I'd need him later. When I searched his pockets, all I found was a matchbox. Once I reignited the candle, I noticed a scrap of paper sticking out from the shaft. It was a set of instructions. None of it made sense. Instead of wasting time trying to decipher the ancient runes and symbols, I decided to do the only thing I knew. I was going to fill that hole before sunrise. I tied Arnold to one of the rotten wooden beams at the basement and headed upstairs to the empty grave. I grabbed a shovel and a wheelbarrow, but after an hour of painfully shoveling 5 wheelbarrows worth of dirt with my bloody and blistered hands, it became obvious that the hole was indeed bottomless. It was no more filled than when I started. Then I remembered Arnold's words.
The earth will not close until its hunger is satisfied.
He might have said too much. It was clear that dirt alone would not suffice. I needed a buddy, and I would do everything in my power for it not to be my sister's. I ran back to the basement and grabbed Arnold by his heels, ready to drag him out into that pit. But then I paused, remembering the restraints I put on him. In that brief moment of hesitation, it hit me, my thoughts finally catching up with my actions. I was shocked at how quickly I had concluded that this man had to die to save my sister. My sister, yes. I wasn't even sure it could work, or if Marie was still alive. I scrambled to check my phone and saw a message from Marie.
I'm home. Mr. Lazarus and I are concerned about you. He said your mental state has been slipping recently. And after your message, I'm inclined to believe him. I had no idea what you've been dealing with. I'll look into some options for getting you the help you need tonight and...
At that point, I stopped reading. All that mattered was that she was home, safe. I didn't care what she thought of me, as long as she was still thinking anything by the time morning came. The problem persisted. How sure was I that dumping Arnold into the hole would work? I stared at the strange symbols on the paper for another hour, my mind looping over every word Arnold had said. Then I remembered the Bible he always carried with him and the small piece of parchment I'd found in the candlestick. It matched the scraps sticking out of the Bible. I found the book tucked away in a drawer beneath the workbench. Inside it, I discovered the last few pieces to the puzzle. I had the answers I needed. The conclusions made my stomach turn. Essentially, the name etched into the granite wasn't final. All that mattered was that a transaction was completed. Think of it like this. The receipts would be checked afterwards, but the order could still be changed once it was placed. All that mattered was that a soul was delivered. With a shaky hand, in the wavering candlelight, I carved a line through my sister's name on the granite slab. Below it, I edged a new name, Arnold Lazarus. My clumsiness caused the pentagram to break in a few places, but thankfully my bloody hand served as an excellent brush to correct any final touch-ups. Once the pentagram was complete, I felt it, a dark presence in the room. It felt like all the air had been sucked out and the candle was burning up the last of my oxygen. I could barely breathe. The presence was far more intense than the helpless old man who had once seemed so threatening. I knew the ritual had worked. Then I heard a sound coming from Arnold. At first, it was quiet. Just a subtle pained wince that soon bellowed into a fit of pure madness and hatred. He was awake, and he was angry.
What have you done?
Arnold shouted, but the voice quickly shifted into one that wasn't quite his own. It felt like he was being borrowed, used as a flesh puppet by some unseen entity.
Why, you think you're clever, don't you? You're only doing me a favor, and for that I owe you. But only once, only for a while. Then you will have to pay me back what I am owed.
I was not speaking to whatever had taken hold of Mr. Lazarus. I had one job to do, and nothing would distract me from my task. The voice crackled before breaking into a rhyme, which it repeated as I dragged it up the stairs and into the hole.
Oh, what a trade! The price I owed will now be paid by flesh and bone. Oh, what a trade! My greatest debt pays me instead. Oh, what a trade!
It stared up at me from the hole and smiled with the most unholy grin as I threw shovelfuls of dirt into its unblinking face. I heard the muffled voice long after I'd buried its head, but I kept shoveling. Blood and soil mixing into a foul sediment that would bury my greatest sin. I would do anything for Marie. I would dig 1,000,000 holes and bury 1,000,000 more if it meant keeping her safe. In my attempt to smother the voice, I realized halfway through filling the hole that it was no longer coming from the grave. Once I stamped down the last of the earth, I could still hear it. It wasn't coming from the hole anymore. It was inside my head, louder than ever. I still hear it some nights when I'm working the graveyard shift. I hear it every time I have to dig a hole for some terrible accident, a genuine accident. I hear it every time I get the request asking for my sister's death, knowing I'll have to offer up another name instead. And that was the story. I work at a cemetery where the graves dig themselves. By Rude Dude Rudolph. Now, please do not leave my camp until the break of dawn. When you wake, I will be gone, but perchance we will see each other again. Good night.